Carol Ann, I'd like to speak with you a little bit about Passion Sunday, which we used to call Palm Sunday, and people often know it that way, and to speak a little bit about the liturgy, what it means to us, and having gone through it today, it's a matter of maybe bringing it back to our mind and deepening our sense of what it's telling us and how it's preparing us for this Holy Week that lies ahead of us. So we want to talk a little bit about Passion Sunday, Palm Sunday. I could start out by saying what strikes me about it is the contrast, a tremendous shift in mood within the liturgy itself. As we do it in our Catholic communities, at least, we begin with the reading of the Gospel, Matthew's Gospel, about the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. It has a very joyful, upbeat kind of quality to it, a triumphant note. And then we suddenly shift, and the color of vestments changes, and we move into the reading of the Passion, and also the readings to prepare us for that Passion, which has a very stark, heavy kind of quality to it. So it is that twofold tone or mood that is one of the first things that strikes me about this liturgy.
And maybe that shift is significant for us on another level too, Jim, in that the liturgy, beginning with Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday and then going right through Holy Week, I think really invites us into the richness of the ritual and the symbolism that the Church offers us, and invites us to experience that in a way that isn't just an experience in the mind. It isn't just a matter of considering what the Word of God has said, but it's letting ourselves notice the shift in the color, and the if there is a procession, everybody likes a parade, and we can perhaps allow ourselves to get into that festive mood, and then all of a sudden notice within our own being that kind of a shift when all of a sudden we're trying to stand, quietly and attentively during the reading of that long Passion. That just even in a bodily sense, we're going to have an awareness of the shift. And I think throughout the events of Holy Week, if we can allow ourselves to be drawn into that experience.
I think you're describing well the way liturgy actually functions. Liturgy is symbolic action. It is ritual that is designed to put us in touch with the deeper dimensions of life. Ritual is a bodily kind of thing, and it touches the imagination and the emotions. It forms the way we look at the world, and it symbolizes what we think God is doing always and everywhere in the world. And so that liturgy at its best isn't simply a cerebral act, and it's not just hearing readings and intellectually thinking about them, but it really touches the whole person, and especially our imaginations and emotions. And I guess for that to happen, you have to sort of give yourself over to liturgy to some degree. And what happens, of course, during Holy Week and beginning with Palm Sunday is the liturgy is heightened, isn't it? It's intensified. The forms of it are a little distinctive. So many of us celebrate liturgy regularly, weekly, and we go to Mass, and it helps focus us, gives us strength for the week, or is our opportunity to worship God and to prepare ourselves to help spread the kingdom in the world. But Holy Week takes on a different character, and the ceremonies are special. They're heightened experiences of ritual, and they get us to the very heart of what the Christian message is supposed to be about.
And in the celebration for today, there's an introduction that the presider reads or says to us, and I think it captures some of what you've just been saying. He says, today we come together to begin this solemn celebration in union with the whole Church throughout the world.
You get sort of a cosmic sense there of everyone doing this, don't you?
And that's I think it's an exciting kind of an experience to have. And then Christ entered into triumph in his own city to complete his work as our Messiah. Let us remember with devotion this entry which began his saving work and follow him with a lively faith. Mm-hmm. That phrase, follow him with a lively faith, to me speaks of an invitation, again, to be with Jesus as he goes through the events of this very Holy Week.
Did you like that other phrase, too, about completing his work?
That's right, completing his work, and then later on it goes on to say that not only has, I don't know if I can find it here, but it's that notion that he's going to complete his work, but he's also beginning the saving work, which we're going to carry on. So we're really invited into this whole dynamic of his life, which we're asked to live in the faith of Easter, in light of that experience as we move beyond Easter.
I was thinking that of the time factors in all of this. There's a way in which Holy Week is a remembrance week, isn't it? It's to call to memory what Jesus has done. In fact, that's one of the functions of the Church and of its liturgy, is to keep alive the memory of Jesus. Because you forget. You forget what he did. You lose focus in life, and so we need the big reminders, and Holy Week does that. Here's what he was all about. Here's how he completed his work. Here's the essence of what it's all about. It's in his death and resurrection. It's in going to Jerusalem with courage and facing up to all of the dark forces that were against him. And to go in and through that experience, he finds new life, which we call resurrection. So we're remembering how Jesus lived, what kind of a person he was, a man of great courage, of vision, and especially of dedication to the cause of God, which we commonly call the spreading of the kingdom. So there's that memory element, but then there's also the present element. In other words, as we read these things or go through Holy Week or celebrate Palm Sunday, we are drawn into it. We're reminded of how God is working those same things in our life today, how we experience the power of the Spirit and go through the death-resurrection cycle ourselves. And finally, it remains a reminder to us of the future. In the future, God will complete this work, and the whole process of restoration will be brought to fulfillment, as we say. And Paul reminds us that the fullness of Christ's body is being built up, and we will finally achieve that at the end time, the parousia, the completion of the work of the Lord. So, what I'm saying is there's a time sequence here. There's a framework of time to look at this Holy Week, a great chance to remember the great deeds, to participate in them now, and always with a sense of hope that they will reach completion one day.
Each time you use that word memory, Jim, I was recalling myself. I think it's Johannes Metz who speaks of the dangerous memory,
Yes.
Of the living, the dying, the rising of Jesus. And I think that can strike some resonance, at least it does in me, at the end of a Lenten season where, we try to become more focused, more attuned. We try to maybe reorder our life a bit. And I think sometimes we can think, okay, now I've done it for the year, I can forget about it. But the events of Holy Week call us into the memory of, in a sense, how dangerous being involved with Jesus is. That at least the mini danger of having to live my life differently from this point on. It's not a matter of slipping back to where I was before this Lent, but it's whatever has been the fruit of my own reflection and prayer and practice, whatever, has brought me to a new place, and hopefully it's a place that gives more evidence of the life of Jesus within me.
It gives a different perspective on Lent, doesn't it? We're going through all these weeks, and we get to the last week. It's not like, well, that's over with, or I finished another one of those, or I've kept my resolutions for 5 weeks. If I can just make one more week, great. It has a different flavor to it, doesn't it? It's more real. It's less hypocritical than that. That's a bad choice of words. It's more, it's a deeper thing, I guess, of what we are about during this Lenten time. We're in the business of transformation, and to talk about the dangerous memory of Jesus reminds me I might have to change my patterns. Somebody who through Lent said, well, I'm going to give up dessert, might have to say, well, what I really got to do now is find better eating patterns for the rest of my life, really. I just can't go back to my old ways. They're not constructive. Maybe somebody has introduced new prayer forms in their life during Lent, and they said they're meditating regularly or reading from the Scriptures regularly, and they begin to say, geez, that really helps me. I can't go back to my old ways. I have to build into my life from now on some deeper prayer experiences. So I think that's one way it gets dangerous, is in terms of the long haul, that I might have to make great changes in my life, or even simple ones, but I got to sustain them now. 6 weeks isn't enough.
And it's also that danger that I guess we get to realize is always there in ongoing conversion. And we talked earlier in Lent about, that process of conversion, which doesn't happen once for all, but continues in our life. And I think as the Church calls us to go through this Lenten season and Holy Week year after year after year, it's kind of reminding us again that this process is ongoing, and the stakes are going to be maybe not more dramatic as we get older, maybe more subtle and more nuanced, but nonetheless significant.
Significant indeed. I was thinking of the meaning of that gospel that begins the Passion Sunday, Palm Sunday, which is the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. I think that sets a tone for all of it. You know, as we were talking here, you say, boy, that's heavy. You know, I mean, wow, you got to change and transform and be converted and put on the mind of Christ. I thought you said that so well about hoping at the end of Lent that you somehow were more conformed to Christ. And I think that could have a heavy character to it, especially when you realize we have to follow him in his death. You have to take up the cross. You got to deal with suffering. I mean, this is heavy. But the import of that gospel, it seems to me, is to remind us of what the end process is. That is, we're going to go into Holy Week and we're going to read the Passion, and we got to go through Good Friday now, but it's all for the sake of triumph, for the final triumph of the resurrection and the fact that Christ is life-giving Spirit for us, and we're going to share in his victory. See, I'm back to that juxtaposition of the two moods, of the heavy mood alongside of the more joyful one. And I'm saying what happens to read that gospel and to remember all the way through Holy Week as we deal with the Passion and the difficult things, the suffering and the death, it's not an end in itself. Christianity is not a masochistic religion. It is a religion of triumph, of victory, of fullness of life, and that's what it's all about. So Good Friday will lead to Easter. The beginning of Passion Sunday reminds us of that, it seems to me.
And I think that same juxtaposition of those two themes is captured in the second reading from Philippians chapter 2, 6 to 11.
Yeah.
You know, in the beginning, it's the description of Jesus' kenosis, that pouring out of himself.
That emptying,
That
right?
emptying, yeah.
Mhm.
When that can be heavy.
Yes.
But then in the final verses, you know, it's but God raised him high. There aren't too many places in Scripture, I don't think they use but.
Yeah.
You know, but I think in using the word but, there is that terrific shift is indicated to us.
Yeah. So we start out, he emptied himself, right? All of those notions, becoming obedient.
To assume the condition of a slave.
Yeah.
He was humbler yet, even to accepting death on the
yeah.
cross.
Right, but then, yeah.
God raised him high and gave him the name which is above all other names, so that all beings in the heavens, on earth, and in the underworld should bend the knee at the name of Jesus, and that every tongue should acclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
It's one of the great hymns in the New Testament, isn't it?
Which really came out of the early liturgy.
That's
again,
right,
so
out of the baptismal liturgy, yeah.
So there again we see how that formative element of liturgy that you were speaking about before continues to be carried out.
And you're right, it captures the rhythm of the day, doesn't it? I really hadn't noticed that in quite that way before. I like that. And it's got the same shift of mood that's so striking and sharp, and represented by the phrase, but God has raised him to life and given him the name above every name. So it is a powerful statement, I think, of this same dialectical theme that we find on Passion Sunday, where death and resurrection are set side by side for us to contemplate.
And in a certain sense, you know, maybe we wouldn't understand the exultation and the triumph on Easter Sunday if we hadn't gone through or had the opportunity to go through in a very real way not only Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday, but also Holy Thursday and Good Friday. In the opening prayer here, it speaks of God having given the human race Jesus Christ our Savior as a model of humility. It struck me when I read that of how, you know, again, Jesus is being placed more and more at the center of this story as we're going to go through this week. Mm-hmm. At other times, maybe we kind of move the cross out to the side and say, well, that'll happen some other time, or I'll deal with that some other time, but I'm looking at maybe the public life of the Lord or some of the gentler times in the Lord's life. I think in this week, we're not allowed to do that.
Yes. The focus is really on Jesus, and a great reminder to us that Christianity is not just a vague philosophy of life or an ideology that's set side by side with other ones. That's not our claim, is it? That Christianity is really dedication to Jesus Christ. It's a call to be a disciple, to follow his way, to take up his cross, which we believe leads to new life, to resurrection, and that we can see exemplified in our everyday existence. So Christianity clearly is a commitment to Christ. It's to say, I'm going to try to live his way. I think that he's got the key to human life. I think he sees it whole and complete. that his example is the one I ought to follow. It's to, as Edward Skillebeck likes to say in his books on Christ and Jesus, the real call is to bet our lives on Jesus Christ. That's what it means, to bet our lives. And that is a heavy business indeed, but filled with promise and filled with hope. So I like what you're saying there, that it becomes clearer during Holy Week that that's what we are about. Jesus is clearly the focus of all of these readings and of the whole endeavor.
And if we've missed some of what he's about, even as we've tried to reflect more and more on his life during Lent, it seems to me that not only the reading of the Passion, but I like to think particularly of the Holy Thursday scenario, that once again, we're focused on the life of Jesus as a life given in service, given for us, that was his great serving work of us. And so the ritual of the washing of the feet and that the celebration of, the gift of Eucharist, I think, and even the context, the meal context, and the emphasis on community remind us, I think, or point up some ways that very practically we can take on the mind and heart of Christ in our everyday experience.
And so you've picked up a couple themes there, that of service and of community, that would seem important to me, that what we ought to get out of all of this liturgical celebration during Holy Week is that it's to lead us back into the business of being signs and instruments of the kingdom, of helping to carry on God's cause in the world, and that involves service, reaching out to others. That's what's so striking about the Holy Thursday liturgy, is that the gospel reading is of the washing of the feet. I mean, it's not exactly what you would expect, but in one sense, but it really does accord with the whole thrust of the Gospels, which is that one day we're going to be judged on whether we fed the hungry and gave drink to the thirsty and sheltered the homeless, and not so much on our liturgical celebrations. I like to think these days that liturgy really is our way of symbolizing what God is doing always and everywhere in the world. Liturgy is our way of forming our consciousness so that we can put on the mind of Christ and live out his whole gospel message in our everyday lives. This seems to be what it's all about. So there's a primacy to life. Liturgy celebrates what's going on in life, it seems to me. And thus the great liturgies of Holy Week send us back, and Holy Thursday probably epitomizes that, sends us back to try to do something in the world that is of value to trying to help other humans and to help humanize this world of ours.
And I think that when we recognize that focus, it can lift our own, not only our awareness, but our own reverence for the work that we are about, the service that, the countless acts of service that people carry out in their everyday life, whether it's taking a friend to work because their car's in the shop, or, making a casserole for a family that's grieving, or whatever. In a certain sense, I think a lot of people take those acts of service for granted, even as they carry them out.
Or even more mundane, I'm thinking of just the mother who cooks another meal for her own family, doesn't send a casserole anyplace, right. But just puts another meal on the table, or the students who, again, attack their homework with some vigor one more time, or something like that. I mean, that in itself seems to me to be the way we help spread the kingdom in the world.
And isn't that what related to what that earlier opening exhortation seemed to be saying to me? Of it's not only that through these events we see how Jesus completed his saving work, but invited us into it. We're part of the saving work that Jesus has begun when we're doing those at times very ordinary and mundane things.
Yeah, I like that, and I do think that opening exhortation does set the mood for the liturgy. Carol Ann, we haven't spent much time on the gospel reading, the Passion, which is one of the major events of the Palm Sunday liturgy, and we will hear the Passion read again on Good Friday. I think it has a power and a beauty. I mean, it's an amazing story. Isn't it? After 2,000 years, you're reading about a fellow who is deserted by friends, who goes through the agony in the garden, who is misunderstood by the religious establishment, and so on. I mean, and is executed finally as a potential political revolutionary. And here we are 2,000 years later reading about that, and celebrating it and talking about it and finding our inspiration in it. I mean, in one sense, that's mind-boggling. I mean, we've got civilization, we've got culture, we've made advances, we're a sophisticated people, and we got television sets and fax machines and all of that, and we're sitting here making a big thing out of reading about some guy in an obscure part of the world who never wrote a book and didn't travel around and made no impact on world history and was executed as a criminal, and we're celebrating that and making it the focal point of our lives. We want to bet our lives on him. I mean, this is a strange business, and the whole reading of the Passion, it seems to me, just highlights that, brings it out.
Well, and I guess as you were just describing that, what kept going through me was, and yet in many ways our world is no different. You know, we continue to have people who are being betrayed and being violated in a variety of ways. That's kind of the, I'd say, the sadness of it, and yet the reading of the Passion, again, I think offers some meaning to us of the redemptive value in some of that suffering that continues to take place.
Yeah, none of that I said would make any sense, would it, apart from the resurrection? And then you get back to the gospel that you read at the beginning of the Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, which has this more positive, joyful resonance to it. And here we're yelling out that Jesus is the King, He's the Son of David, He's the one we've been waiting for, the true Messiah. That is what gives meaning, finally, to this other rather stark story that we see in the gospel, in the Passion account.
You know, the readings in today and throughout this week are so profound and so rich. I think that they often have the impact of being overwhelming for lots of people. But I think that maybe there's something to be attentive to in that. The mystery that we celebrate is overwhelming in the largesse of God, in what God has done in Jesus. So if we feel overwhelmed by them, that's maybe not the worst
maybe that's all
experience
right,
in the world.
I mean, it's interesting to see how people hear that Passion. In a sense, we've heard it so often. I mean, I don't know really what it does to the average parishioner, or how it's heard these days, or what sort of mood people are in. I mean, I think the Passion account has a power and a beauty of its own. I almost hate to preach after it. I think the liturgy calls for maybe a short homily. I think sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, but I often feel sort of strange preaching after it, like, well, maybe I'm supposed to, but maybe it ought to just speak for itself. It says it all in a way, and if we can just enter into the story. On the other hand, maybe there's that old thing of that we learned a long time ago, that when we've heard these readings at a young age, we tend to get fixated at that age, and you still hear them like when you first knew them. And the great task is to hear the Passion now as an adult, and to bring to it our own experiences, our own sense maybe of the death of loved ones, our own suffering in life, our tragic sense of life, all of the dark forces that have assailed us, sort of are epitomized or brought together in the dark forces that take over Jesus at this time and lead him to his death. So maybe we can try to hear it in a new way, or assimilate it as an adult and not just when we first heard it when we were youngsters.
And maybe another new way of listening to it is to listen and just allow whatever will touch us to touch us, not to be laboring under an expectation that I have to master the whole of the Passion this year as I hear it. Maybe some whole paragraphs of it will just elude me because I will have noticed that a particular person, a particular character or phrase caught the attention of my heart, and that may be the person or phrase to stay with. And there will be other readings of the Passion when we can hear another moment. You know.
I like that sense of sort of sober realism about what is possible in liturgy. You can't assimilate all of Palm Sunday or the whole of the Holy Week. It's not possible for the human being to assimilate all the messages that are there, and maybe we have to be content with picking up the ones that might be especially pointed for us. And doing it your way, I think, allows for that. I suppose the danger is at the end of Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday, you say, well, I didn't get anything out of it. I was waiting for a message, and nothing happened, you know.
But
that
even
could
that,
happen.
But even that then might lead me with the question of why couldn't I hear anything? Maybe Lent didn't bring me to as great an attentiveness as I had hoped. But I think it's not only to be content with a small word, if you will, but to recognize that God's action now in my life is in that 1, 10, 20 words that seem to really touch me. That we have a God who intervenes or acts in our life with a very unique and personal touch, so that what may touch you in the Passion this year may not be the thing that touches me, and that may be in God's plan for both of us.
Yes, and that alerts us, doesn't it, to the distinctive message that just might be contained in any celebration of the liturgy like that. I suppose some people looking at read that Passion could identify with any number of characters, right? With Judas's betrayal, and someone who's had a betrayal in their life, that might touch that off. We might think of Peter and his impetuousness, and then his great failures. Maybe people who are more have that kind of personality, or people who have known disappointed themselves in a serious way might identify with Peter. You can have all kind of possibilities there, couldn't you, of seeing how the characters could be a catalyst for me looking deeper within.
That's right, and therefore, or as a result of that, then one begins to get some sense of where in this grand story one is. What is the particular point of entrance into this story for me this year? It probably will come through one of those characters or one of those phrases that has touched me, and then the story offers meaning to me in my life at this moment. And I think that recognizing the particular meaning that it has can sometimes be a stepping stone to our recognizing that the entire story has meaning, though maybe right now I'm not alive to the whole story.
Not exactly sure what that would be. Well, Carol Ann, we've been talking about Passion Sunday, often known as Palm Sunday, because we get palms on that day, and sometimes have processions with those palms and try to celebrate what this Holy Week is all about. I think that's been your emphasis, that it prepares us for the celebration of the Holy Week. It gets us in tune with both the positive and the negative messages. The triumphal entry gospel at the beginning reminds us that as we go through the Passion and deal with all the darkness that the Lord had to experience in His own life and that we experience in our lives, it's all for a purpose. Purpose is finally for Easter. Good Friday leads to the celebration of Easter. The death of the Lord leads to His resurrection. That remains our final hope as we enter this week of special liturgical celebration when we encounter the Lord in a particular way.